The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog and join the Progressive Army. And now, ladies and gentlemen,
You're now about to witness the truth.
It's the Benjamin Dixon Show.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I am, of course, your host, Benjamin Dixon. It is Monday, October 24th, 2016. We are 2 weeks and 1 day away from this election finally being over. And I promise you, I am excited. I am so excited about this election ending. More than anything else, I will be so glad when this thing is over, because I don't know about you, but I am tired of all of it, every bit of it, 100% of it. But I'm not too tired to discuss it with you because, one, that's my job. Well, that's my second job, but it's still my primary job for this hour to talk politics with you. So welcome to the Benjamin Dixon Show. I'm glad to have you. Glad that you are here. As always, last week was kind of light. I really wasn't here a lot last week, hardly at all. Whoa, what's this? Okay, somebody's calling already. I wasn't here really last week. Thursday was my wife's birthday, and I had to take care of the wifey, ladies and gentlemen. So hopefully you understand. If you don't understand, then that's too bad, because I know you guys understand. But special thanks to my homegirl, Anoa Changa, for coming through and taking care of business while I was gone. It's always good to have somebody who can have your back. So she was here twice last week covering for me, and I appreciate it. I want to thank Giovanni. Giovanni is our latest patron, and bear with me because I have to give him an applause. So this will be my last time using the clap track tonight. But thanks to Giovanni for becoming a patron, and thanks for everyone who supports the show, whether you support financially. Tonight there will be a bonus show. Matter of fact, I'm going to do my best to do a bonus show every night this week, plus the Friday bonus show, full hour Friday, for my patrons, because last week I was kind of missing in action, but I know you guys understand and appreciate blah, blah, blah. You appreciate me, but blah, blah, blah to that, because I appreciate you more. Right. So anyway, let's get down to the news. I am curious about what this person is calling in for at the top of the show, but we're going to do some news and then I'll get to the caller. All right. Apparently I'm going to have to go without it's not the first time, but there we go. There we go. I don't know why you're there. All right. So where do I want to start? Let's talk about the presidential polls. It's headed. It's going to be a blowout. It should be a blowout. So you should feel 100% okay voting. Even if it wasn't, you're going to feel okay. I want you to feel okay about voting for whoever you want to vote for. Just go out and vote right in your cousin, whoever, but just go out and do your part by voting. It's going to be a blowout. Hillary Clinton is going to win. She is going to devastate Donald Trump. And Donald Trump is helping her do that. Every step of the way, Donald Trump is helping her. Let me show you why I say that, right? So in a two-way race, and you'll see it on your screen, in a two-way race between, and relax, I'm going to bring up the four-way race as well. All right. Just have to say that because I have some really aggressive listeners and followers. In the two-way race, Hillary Clinton is beating Donald Trump in the most recent polls that came out yesterday by an average of 5%. The biggest margin there would be the ABC News tracking poll, which has Hillary Clinton nationwide up 12 points. Also, let's see. So in the four-way ways, and that's hard. Say that 4 times fast. In a four-way race, let's see if I pick the real one. Yeah, this is the one. So in a four-way race between Clinton, Trump, Johnson, and Stein, Clinton is up nationally with an average of +5. Trump only leads in the Rasmussen Reports poll by +2. Everything else, Hillary Clinton is demolishing Donald Trump. Jill Stein has an average of 2.3 points nationwide. Johnson 5.9. Johnson has dropped tremendously, but he is over the 5%. So good for the Libertarians. They need to get that 5%. I hope Jill Stein likewise gets 5%, so that they can get federal funding. But more interesting than just the average of polls across the nation are the individual polls, state by state. So some swing states, some states that were not previously swing states are actually swing states now. You'll see Hillary Clinton is making Donald Trump spend money in Texas. Donald Trump is leading in Texas, but the fact that he actually is competing in Texas now, and the fact that Hillary Clinton, that he's only leading by plus 4 points in the average of polls for Texas. I mean, that's just outside your average margin of error of like 3 points, right? Or 3.6% is like the average that I've been seeing a lot lately. So, I mean, Texas is up for grabs. He'll probably still win Texas, but still, the fact that it's purple, right? Texas has been a deep red state. And I saw some data that was tweeted out to me that showed the striking difference between older voters in Texas and younger voters in Texas. It's like a complete inverse. The older you are, you're absolutely, I think, here the numbers are coming back to me, 22 points. If you're like 65 and older, you go to Donald Trump by 22 points. But if you're a millennial, you go to Hillary Clinton by about, I think, 12 points, right? So there's a breakdown in Texas that isn't surprising to me, even though Texas normally gets, it's completely red, right? Conservative through and through. It's not surprising because Donald Trump is not the typical conservative Republican. And so this is how Donald Trump is helping Hillary Clinton, because he is repulsing the standard bearers of the Republican Party. He's repulsing the younger Republicans. And so these are all voters who normally would vote. They would vote for Ted Cruz, right? Which is asinine in and of itself. But they would vote for Ted Cruz, but they wouldn't vote for Donald Trump. And this is why Donald Trump's candidacy is essentially handing Hillary Clinton a monsoon of a landslide. All right, so that's just Texas. Georgia, Donald Trump is only up by 4 points in Georgia, traditionally a red state, but it's now in play. You know, so that the fact that it's even considered a swing state at this point is really obscene, in the sense that this is going to be a landslide. And we talked about it before, but I'll say it really quickly. We cannot allow the narrative. They're going to try. They're going to do their very best. Hillary Clinton is going to say this on election night. I guarantee you will hear Hillary Clinton say that the voters have sent her to Washington with a mandate. No, we are not sending you. Nobody is sending Hillary Clinton to Washington with a mandate. We're simply repudiating Donald Trump and saying that he is, he's Donald Trump. All right, so in other swing states, Colorado, Clinton is up by 7 points. Arizona, I already said, up by 1.3. And these are all in the four-way race, right? So these are polls that include Jill Stein and Gary Johnson. In Florida, Clinton is up by 3.8 points. And in Michigan, Clinton is up, I don't have the number here, I think it was ridiculous, like 7 points. So, again, those are the latest polls. It's not really even a competition at this point. It's merely just the machinations before 2 weeks. I'll still be glad when it's over, regardless. All right, let's talk about Obamacare. So, President Obama announced that premiums for people on the affordable or with insurance policies underneath the Affordable Care Act, according to the Associated Press. President Obama now announced that those premiums will drastically increase next year. One case outlined a person in Arizona who had a policy that premium of about $114 a month would potentially see his premium quadruple to over $400 a month. So the question is begged, like, how the hell did this happen, right? Where are the failings in Obamacare? Well, for those of us who saw this on the horizon. So you have two critiques. Let's start with the Republican critique, and then we'll get to the leftist critique, because the leftist critique is actually the right critique, right? The Republican critique is pretty fatuous in that, one, this is their idea, right? They have nothing to critique because Obamacare is essentially Romney care. It's a Republican conservative think tank idea that President Obama took credit, implemented, yeah, but it's still a Republican idea. So there is a gaping hole of substance, or the lack thereof, in terms of a Republican alternative to the Affordable Care Act. As bad as the Affordable Care Act is panning out to be, and we'll discuss the reasons why, because it simply say, oh, it's a failure is rudimentary, elementary, and we don't do that here, right? But this is all you're going to get from a lot of critics. Oh, it's terrible. And then Republicans go one step further and say it's terrible and we need to repeal and replace. But with what? The only person who presented something that was remotely that could remotely be considered an actual plan was Jeb Bush. And Jeb Bush's policies, his policy on health care actually came to the detriment of minorities and poor people, which are overwhelmingly minorities, unfortunately, right? So he was genuine enough to be truthful, but his policy, once you looked at Jeb Bush's policy, his proposed replacement to Obamacare was ridiculous in the sense that it came at the expense of the most vulnerable. But outside Jeb Bush's ridiculous attempt, at least it was an attempt, there's no concrete plan on the table to replace the over 10 million people who are getting benefits from Obamacare now. And I don't care what nobody says. Listen, I have great insurance now, great. But for a long, very long gap in my life, I lived without insurance. And I don't care what anybody says. Bad insurance is better than no insurance, because bad insurance can keep you from getting a $10,000 bill at the emergency room, because at least you can go to a primary care and tell them that you have your chest pains. You think you're having chest pains, and they can help you understand that it's just acid reflux versus spending $10,000 in the emergency room for 6 hours for them to tell you it's acid reflux. Right. So it is. And as you see the story in the AP, you really should read the AP breakdown of it, because it's actually really good. It does go into the fact that there's a lot of crappy coverage. But if you've ever lived without insurance, for as long as I have lived without insurance, and as long as many Americans have lived without insurance, you'll take whatever you can get until you can get something better. And that's the problem. Nobody is proposing on the right. We'll talk about the leftist critique, which is the right critique. But nobody on the right. Donald Trump is running around saying that they're going to repeal and replace. He doesn't have a single plan to replace Obamacare, except all they want to do is repeal it, which is going to leave millions of Americans without any insurance. And trust me, you don't want to go to the emergency room without insurance, because you will pay $500 for a shot of Pepsid when you can go to the over-the-counter to get Pepsid AC for $10. I think I paid $100 for a Tylenol because I didn't have insurance. So as crappy as the coverage is, people are actually able to go. Now, here's one of the problems with Obamacare. It's because it did not have a public option to begin with. And because they tried to make a quasi-universal coverage with the private sector has the ability to say, this is not working out for our bottom line, so we're out. And in fact, in the AP article, it actually outlined that one of the reasons, there's really three reasons that this is failing. One, not enough people are enrolling. OK, so that's just the problem of America, right? That's everybody's fault or nobody's fault, however you want to look at it. The second part is the reason that Obamacare is in trouble right now. It's because the insurance companies literally said that people were sicker than they expected. I mean, listen to that. They're backing out of the markets which means there's not enough competition now, right? So they had the ability to get access to a brand new pool of people that they never had access to make more money. And then when they realize, oh, these people are sick. They're like legitimately sick. Like they have to go to the doctor 10 times, because 10 times in a month, because for the last 20 years, they never went before. And they realize that these sick people are costing them more money. And so now they've opted out. And I think the options have dropped down from like 300 options down to about 100, give or take, because I'm going off of pure memory here. Right. So now they realize that people were too sick or sicker than what they realized. It's going to hit their bottom line. They're not going to hit the profit margins that they want to hit. So they're out. Boom. Done. And then the third reason Obamacare is in trouble is because of some complex system that they had in place to control the increase in premiums that is not working out the way it's supposed to be. Now, the real story probably is inside of the technical component of whatever algorithm they were using to keep premiums low as possible. But I have not seen anyone really dig into that third component as to why their calculations and how they could help keep the cost of premiums down, not price control, but cost controls, right? It's failing. So those are the three reasons Obamacare is ostensibly in trouble. President Obama has said, well, this is just growing pains. OK, these are some hellified growing pains to see your premiums go from $114 a month to over $400 a month. Right. And that's an extreme example, but that's an extreme example based on what they're predicting right now. The reality of it is we don't know how hard it's going to hit people as the new enrollments start to come in. That's one take. Now, President Obama has since today come out and said and put back on the table the public option. And when I click this applause, it's not for Obama coming out for the public option. It's for everyone who's been saying we need a public option for the longest. Public option back on the table because they realize no matter how much you feed these private insurance companies, they're not going to willingly take on risk that puts their profits at risk. They're just not designed to do that. They're not designed to do anything out of goodwill or for the betterment of society or for the common good, to promote the common welfare. They're not designed to do that. They're there for profit. And we've been saying this. We've been saying this forever. So if you're not going to go with single payer, at a minimum, we should have had a public option. And and they actually had the chance to get the public option in the first place in 2010. But President Obama opted out. And so now on this side of it, we see that there's quote unquote growing pains. Now he's entertaining the public option again. Well, congratulations, President Obama. You're caught up with Bernie Sanders. You caught up with the rest of us who've been yelling public option. As a matter of fact, we're actually yelling single payer because there will always, so long as people have to pay for their health, corporations will always do whatever they can to not help the sickest among us and to charge as much as they can as for health. It's not that they're evil. You can argue that they're evil. That's not my job. It's simply built into the system. It's structured that way that if whatever it is that you need, if somebody is selling it, they have the incentive to charge you as much as they possibly can. And so in our case, if we need health insurance, then they have an incentive to raise their premiums as much as they possibly can get away with. And they have an incentive not to help people who are chronically ill or whose chronic illness is so expensive that it hurts their bottom line. They have no incentive whatsoever to do that. So at a minimum, a public option should have always been there. And the ideal situation, well, nothing is ever ideal. So I don't want to sell you that pipe dream because single payer is not without its own problems. But one of the problems would not be insurance companies looking at a pool of people that they said they wanted. This was a corporate give out. This was a handout to the biggest insurance companies, and then they realized, oh, these people are just too sick. We can't really provide for them. So there's always a place for a public option in every vital service. There should be a public option. There's a public option for education. There should be a public option for healthcare. There should be a public option for living, not ghettos, right? I know there's public housing, but they intentionally make them the ghettos. But there should be, for those vital things that you need to live, there should be a public option for all of them. And maybe because his signature, he doesn't even have enough time to actually fix this, right? So, and it's going over into Hillary's hands. So what the hell? Anyway, just end the conversation there. There's no reason to finish talking about how they're going to fix it. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and/or question?
Hello, Benjamin?
Yep, this is you. You're live. What's your name?
Oh, wow. My name is Steven. I'm from Orlando, Florida, man. I'm a long-time listener. I've been waiting to call one day to actually speak with you.
Hey, man. Appreciate that.
I'm actually speaking on this about the single payer as far as insurance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually part-time military. I had to get back in the military solely because of the fact of insurance purposes. It's such a big issue with insurance, me and my wife, that we felt it was in the better interest of us doing this. I have 3 quick questions.
Sure, go for it.
First question is, how do you feel about the correlation between the complaints of insurance and relating to pharmaceutical companies upcharging things so high and how it affects that? Also, what are some of the correlating issues that you see when it comes to the single payer that will be a problem?
Mm-hmm.
And thirdly, when it comes to people being insured, what would be your ultimate idea of the better choice?
Between what? What are my options for that choice?
I mean, in general, if you could take a hybrid of single payer and issues that you have with single payer,
Mm-hmm.
what would
Okay.
your monstrosity, your big monster be?
Oh,
what
my
would
big
you
monster be?
ultimately
Woo.
feel would?
I don't know if I can answer the big monster thing without laying, showing everybody my socialist card. But so let me ask your questions again, because I could probably answer them in the reverse order. All right. So what's my solution? My realistic solution is realistic. This is my realistic solution is a hybrid between public and private. Private is going to always be there politically with a lot of money to fight back against anything that's totally socialized, right? And so to have a single payer system, to transition from America's corporate based system to a single payer system, I mean, that might, I don't know that we are actually capable of doing that without some maybe even literal bloodshed. But we not only don't go for a socialized option, we don't even go for a public option, right? We don't even go to have the government be an option for people to choose. And that's a fight in itself. So my realistic proposal would be a hybrid. Let the private sector do whatever the hell they want to do. There should be a public option for everything. What do I think is the problem with single payer? It's really just the demand, right? Do we have enough supply to meet the demand? Because as you see, there's a lot of sick people in America, and demand and quality.
Correct.
Because as you give more of anything, it's expected that the quality goes down. The average quality goes down. That doesn't necessarily have to be the case, but in economics, we kind of believe that that's the case. Like the more supply that you have, the more demand that you try to meet, the average quality that's delivered in any good, no matter whether it's education or healthcare or except widgets, right? They don't apply that to widgets, oddly enough, but that's a whole nother conversation. So mainly supply and then potentially quality. And then what was your first question again?
The first question was, I believe it was about, pharmaceutical companies.
The correlation between that.
From my perspective, the correlation, my perspective and what I have seen is, even though insurance is really, really high, but if you look in correlation with how much we pay for pharmaceuticals, and keep in mind pharmaceuticals that have not always been proven to be the best options. How do you feel that they correlate between the prices that we see far as these upcharges? I mean, just like you just said earlier,
Yep.
they're looking at premiums going up. I mean, how do you feel, in your opinion, that correlates between each other?
I mean, it's directly. Listen, we could reduce. We can, and people hate when you do this. I actually hate when people do this, but you could reduce most of these conversations down to supply and demand, or capital versus labor, or need versus profit. Right? If you reduce it down to the need of the people versus profit, the need for profit, then that explains all of it. It explains why EpiPen will increase the cost of that life-saving medication by 500%, because they can get away with it, and they have every profit motive to do that. And same thing with health insurance, right? If they can charge higher premiums or just increase their profits by delivering less to you, they have an incentive to do this, which means that there's a natural enmity. There's a natural competition between the health of your citizens and corporations who make profits off of it, which automatically should be a flag to anyone who's reasonable and rational and say, if that's the case, then we should provide at a minimum a public option. But the idealized world is simply single payer, like just single payer, no. Well, anyway, again, I'm going to hold my Marxist card a little bit. All right, man. thanks for your call,
right,
man. 857-600-0518 if you want to join the conversation. Yeah, I mean, I don't hate to say I told you so. I'll just say Bernie told you so. I mean, we were saying this back in 2010, right? Hell, that's so long ago, man. I was a young man back then. I remember we were arguing this tooth and nail, like this was the fight, public option or not. And we backed off the public option, even though popular support for it was there. Adolph Reed, one of the reasons I respect Adolph Reed so much is because he makes the simple case that the public good is good. The public good is good. Having a public option for everything, particularly things that are vital for survival. Housing, healthcare, education, food, all those things. There is absolutely nothing wrong, even from a capitalistic perspective, even from communists are all the devil perspective, right? Let's go to the far right. Having a public option is simply good for the development of your human capital. Develop your human capital, they'll have some money to spend in your markets. So even from a capitalist perspective, a public option is good. And that's one of the things I've seen Adolph Reed argue so brilliantly. Actually, let's take another caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What's your name, comment, and or question?
Hey, Ben, it's Jared from Downingtown, PA.
Hey, Jared, how's it going, man?
Pretty good. I want to just comment a little bit about your debate last week between you and Nick on Syria.
Oh, man, I should have held your call because I'm getting ready to do an entire segment on it. But maybe you can introduce us to that segment. Go ahead.
Okay. I think Nick was pretty spot on about Syria because you left in your debate, you left out a lot of things. Like you never covered the CIA destabilizing the Syrian people during the beginning of the Arab Spring uprising, which has been confirmed that they were doing, because there wasn't enough of a majority of the population to oppose Assad. So they started to have to destabilize it and then bring in foreign fighters from places like Syria and Qatar to prop up the so-called rebels. And I think that if we were that the only way we could probably have any peace in Syria is if we just stop sending arms there. Like everybody, just have a total embargo set up on Syria, like any country, period. So if you were like to send in arms, there would be like a UN report that would sanction your country if you did that. And I also don't agree that if you're somehow not in favor of overthrowing Assad, you're somehow pro-Russian or something along that lines. Because when Russia started bombing Syria, I opposed that just as much as I did the U.S. bombing Syria. So it's kind of.
Well, to be sure, I want to make sure. I don't want that to hang out in the air. Now, I never made the argument that I never reduced the argument down to if you are pro-Assad, you're pro-Russia. I mean, there are a lot of nuances to. There's a lot of connections to make that argument. But go ahead.
Yeah. But I think like there's a lot of false equivalency though when it comes to Assad. Like he's this like really awful. I mean, yeah, okay. There's all dictatorships around the world, and they all do things. But we have to understand, Assad did not attack the United States. Assad has never once threatened us in any way, shape, or form. The reason we are doing this is so we can destabilize Syria, so Israel doesn't have any threat on its border, and so we can also take out Iran's proxy with Syria, which is what Hillary Clinton's plan is, to take out Iran and then take out Syria and then go into Iran, which was the general. There was a general running in the Democratic primary who laid all this out, that after 9/11 we were going to invade like a couple dozen countries, and we've already invaded like, we took out Libya, we took out Iraq, we're trying to take out Syria, we took out Yemen, and so yeah, the whole plan is to take out Syria and then go into Iraq, which is what Hillary is going to do as president. I can almost guarantee you that's what she's going to do.
That she's going to go into Iran,
where yes, and in Ukraine as well, where she is funding the neo-Nazi, neo-fascists there, so we can have another.
Wait, and she's funding the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Did I hear you right?
There has been documented case. Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave you on. I want to leave you on the line. I want you to leave on the line. I want to leave you on the line because I want you to serve as a proxy for everyone who disagrees with me on Syria. Is that okay?
Okay.
All right. Let me just do one thing. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. One, let me make it clear to my audience and to everyone. When I'm for something, I don't equivocate. I come out for it. I'm like, this is what I believe in. This is what it should be. Not once have I ever said we should intervene in Syria. Then you go back and look at the tapes. What I will do is I will play the hell out of a devil's advocate. I will argue, especially when I see flaws in arguments that are being made by people I like and people I respect. I will argue the hell out of the other side just to expose those flaws. But not once have I said that we should institute a no-fly zone, or that I'm in favor of instituting a no-fly zone, or that I'm in favor of American interventionism. What I have said is that unless America intervenes on that level, there is really no tilting of the power structure there right now, except for the balance of power, the stalemate, except for what you just presented and what the Green Party presents and what Nick mentioned, which is ostensibly to actually, let me take ostensibly out. Your suggestion is to dry up the arms. My argument about drying up the arms is still the same. We cannot enforce an arms embargo on Syria without force. Just the idea of blocking any other nation from sending arms to that region is going to require interventionism. So it's like you take one interventionism off the table in favor of another one. How would we stop? How will we stop some other actor from going in and supplying arms because there is a demand for arms? And if there's one market we all should be able to agree will be served in this global world. I just say in the world, it's the arms market. Like, that's a supply that will always be met. And I just don't reasonably see how simply saying to dry up the arms would actually be accomplished without some huge intervention by the UN or by America. But it's got to be enforced, and you cannot enforce something like that without force itself. So to me, that's kind of like that. That's really not a solution. It sounds good. It's the more, and I said this so many times, it's the moral thing to do. It is the right thing to do to stop sending arms to the entire region, for the love of God. But that is not the solution to the question that's at hand. How do you end the war in Syria? That is the long-term solution of how do you end wars in general. But that's not the immediate solution. And so before I go forward, I want you to respond to that. Respond to that on behalf of everyone who disagrees with me.
Well, the U.S. doesn't want to end the war in Syria. That implies we do. I mean, we don't want to overthrow Assad, but at the same time, we want to keep ISIS in check so we can, just have it like as a little wind-up doll. So every time, it looks like ISIS is being defeated, they can just wind it up again and then just have it go out and unleash it in Libya or Afghanistan or Yemen or something like that. I don't know where you're getting the idea that the U.S. wants to stop any of this stuff. The U.S. is the one who started all this.
Okay, so here's my other here. Let me jump in there, because here's where I totally disagree with all of you. This leftist critique of America, which I probably 85% to 90% co-sign with. But what it does is it reduces every situation globally down to being about America. There was a revolution that started, and maybe revolution is too harsh of a word, but there were protests of hundreds of thousands of people who were pro-democracy, who were opposing the Assad regime. And here's something I didn't do, and I want to give credit to one of my listeners who called me on it. Nick helped presenting this thought that that Assad was democratically elected and accepted by his people. That's historically inaccurate. Assad, first of all, he received the regime from his father, who obtained it through a military coup. And from 1971 to 2000, he served as the president of Syria through brute force and then handed it down to his son. Elections in 2000 and 2007, the only opposition came from his own party, from the Ba'athist Party. Right. So there was no free and fair elections in Syria. He just simply had, much like China in many regards, it's like you're running against your own party. You're running against yourself. So this idea that they had democracy in Syria was something that was forwarded last week that I didn't call out. And it's absolutely ahistorical. It's not accurate. But that's kind of like a finer detail. But we reduce this entire conflict in Syria to being about America, when in actuality, there are people over there who rebelled on their own accord, on their own wishes, because they wanted something different. They saw what happened in Tunisia, and this is going to be a horrible use of words, but it spread like wildfire through the region. And the Arab Spring, people saw that. And by the time it got to Syria, Assad said, hell no, and he crushed it. And actually, let me choose my words better. Before he crushed it, he brutally tried to crush it. And by his overreaction, by his just overwhelming use of force against protesters, that fueled the revolution even more. And then he crushed it with troops, it really escalated. It started in Syria. It escalated by Syria. Now, is America clean in this? No, America's never clean in anything. Let's be sure about that, right? Yes, there were some operatives on the ground involved, but this started. There are people who are there still who are standing on the original cause of the rebellion back in the Arab Spring. This does not mean that the rebel forces that are fighting are all pro-democracy. Some of the rebel forces that are fighting are just as nefarious as the Assad regime, which is why America hasn't found any rebels that we can, comfortably give, supply to the point where we help them win, right? Because it's really become a cluster of competing forces there. But to be sure, this reduction of the entire region to being about America's imperialistic desires really erases the reality of two things. One, this started in Syria as a result of a couple of factors. One of those factors being the Arab Spring. And then two, I don't care how we cut it. Whether or not we think America is evil or noble, there is an existing humanitarian crisis in Syria. Whether America gets involved for humanitarian reasons, which we rarely do, that's besides the point. But what I've noticed and what I really, really dislike about our side of the argument is that we will erase the humanitarian crisis because we want to focus, and we should, but we can simultaneously do it. Focus on America's hand, America's imperialism. But it's like if it and I'll give you the best example. And then you don't have to stay on hold because I'm sure you're probably ready to go. But here's the best example. When Jill Stein finally caught up with the rest of us, I'm sorry, Jill, but you're a year late on the pipelines, right? The competing pipelines, the Russian pipeline and the Qatar pipeline, both designed to go through Syria. Assad said no to the one that was U.S. backed from 2009, and he actually co-signed with the one from Russia. I get it, right? It's like, oh, this is the explanation. This is how we understand what's happening in Syria. No. One, why didn't you know about this a year and a half or 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Why are you just now getting this information? And then two, why do we always reduce international relations down to American imperialism? And to do that, we do it by erasing a lot of things. We erase the people who rebelled. We even erase the fact that they have the right to do that, right? Shit, here we go. All right, I'm going to finish this out because I want to talk about other stuff. I'm tired of talking about Syria, not for real. I have seen people who are opposed to Saudi Arabia's activity and war in Yemen at the invitation of the Yemeni government to suppress the Houthi rebels. I've seen people who oppose that regime, that government, that invited government in, turn around and use the fact that Russia has been invited in as a justification for what's happening in Syria. In other words, I've seen people say, oh, well, Syria, Russia is there by permission, so they're there legally. Flip the conversation and let's go a little further south. And they say, oh, well, what Saudi Arabia is doing in Yemen is an atrocity. Yeah, but the Yemeni government invited Saudi Arabia there to participate in their quote unquote civil war. So it's like, are you going to at least be consistent with your argument? Because once you are inconsistent with your argument, you're erasing things to fit your argument. So if you're okay with intervention because a government invited you there, then why are you not okay with the intervention that's happening in Yemen? I'm not okay with either one of them. That's the first thing we erase. Then we erase the fact that people have the right to rebel, right? Here in the United States, progressives, leftists, Marxists, socialists, all of us are waiting for the overthrow of capitalism so that we can take over for socialism. But then we're going to say that the people of Syria who wanted pro-democracy had no legal right to rebel? What the entire hell? What? It doesn't work like that. You can't. Are you reserving the right to rebel to be only if it's rebelling against America? So you switch your argument. And I don't know who the you is. I'm just saying you in general. Let me say they, right? So it's not so personal. They switch their argument and say that, oh, it's fine for Russia to be there because Russia was invited. But it's horrible that Saudi Arabia is in Yemen, even though the Yemeni government invited Saudi Arabia there. Then two, they erase the very essence of rebellion against a brutal dictatorial regime. And they erase it by changing history, Nick. But anyway, I leave Nick alone because he's not here to argue in his very effective way. Nick is a brilliant debater and has really great arguments. I'll leave Nick alone. Nick, we come on and discuss this a little more. Because he's not the only one. I've seen this argument so many places that we erase the reality that Assad is a piece of shit. Let's not erase that. Do not, oh my God, do not make heroes out of villains just because they are the opposite side of the American empire, which you so vehemently oppose. Sometimes, somebody tweeted me, sometimes the enemy of your enemy is a piece of shit. Assad is that. So all these ruminations to try to make Assad to be okay, if for no other reason that he's the legal authority, then what about the legal authority in the United States? What about the legal authority of the structure, of the infrastructure, of the institutions to rule America? The very institutions that we oppose on so many levels. Some of you oppose a lot more than I do, but I oppose them as well. If you are planning and hoping for a proletariat revolt here in the United States, how in the hell are you going to erase the Syrian people's right to revolt over there just because their revolution over there has fingerprints of American imperialism? Which goes to the other thing. I'm knee deep in it, so whatever. Let me just go all the way and get it all out. Again, the enemy of your enemy is sometimes your enemy. They're not your friend. And if the purpose of opposition towards the rebellion in Syria is because we are trying to make sure that American imperialism doesn't do what it always does, which is get involved and mess things up, right? For the purposes of spreading its empire. If that's the purpose, then how do you come to terms with the fact that Russia is just as capitalistic, just as imperialistic, and just as oligarchical as America? Is Russia's and okay, let me finish. Let me make the logical connections here, right? The logical connections here, because I want to make sure you're clear. I'm not saying that if you are against intervention that you're pro-Russia. No, I don't make simple arguments like that. I never have, and I never will. What I'm saying is if your opposition to intervention is to oppose American imperialism, then how do you explain? You don't have to, but my question to you would be, how do you explain Russia's intervention for their expansion of their empire, of their capitalistic system? Because they are capitalistic and they are very imperialistic. They have a rich history of empire, very deep. Anyway, let me stop being extra. So I'm like, so you erase that, and then you have to erase. Now, all of this is in the context. Let me pause. All of this is in the context of this simple fact. I think America should not. I think the only reason anyone should intervene is because of the humanitarian crisis that does exist. Now, whether it's intervention from America or whether it's intervention from somebody you approve of, there is, and I might get violent and slap somebody if you try to tell me that there is no humanitarian crisis. In fact, you will notice that I would not talk about Syria until I saw what I believe to be a humanitarian crisis that posed a philosophical problem for me. And this entire last month has been about you coming along with this philosophical, this problem, because there is a problem, right? We don't want intervention We don't. We don't want a no-fly zone. But at least be truthful and say that if you don't want intervention and you don't want a no-fly zone, that, in my opinion, saying that we're going to stop selling American arms over there, that's not going to stop it. That's not going to stop it. But if we do, let's go all the way with the Green Party argument. If we do stop selling arms, and let's say we got an embargo and there are no arms going there to back the rebels, at least be willing to admit that you are turning over people who revolted and started a revolution to a man who has power, but not power ordained by the people. At least admit that. Doesn't mean that you're pro-Russia. It just means that you are more comfortable with Assad being in control than you are with American interventionism. And I don't think that's a hard thing to say. I just think it's very disingenuous when people don't say that. You are more comfortable, because that's the inevitable outgrowth of your argument, is that Assad will remain. You are more comfortable with a man who used chemical weapons on his people, a man who killed hundreds of thousands of his own people. Well, let's just split it in half. Let's just say he killed half. So 125,000 of his own people. You're okay with him having power and maintaining control over the very people he oppressed than you are with American interventionism. And somebody could really make the logical argument for that. Make that argument, but don't avoid, embrace the bad parts of your idea, because there are bad parts of every idea. I don't know if there's anything else to say about that other than the fact that to thine own self be true. To thine own self be true, man. Don't adjust. Don't say something is okay in situation X and say it's not okay in situation Y. Don't reduce everything to being about America. Yes, America is grimy. And then there's one level of argument that actually, when I talk about the political dead tonight, I can talk about that. All right. But because of time, I'm tired of talking about no, I'm not. I'm lying. Let me stop lying. I'm not tired of talking about Syria, because I like talking about Syria because it forces us to confront our arguments and see how far we're willing to go with the natural conclusion of our arguments. And I think it presents a wonderful dilemma for progressives internationally. It presents, because our solutions are not as clean and simple as we reduce them to being. The solution in Syria, I'm sorry, Jill Stein, is not as simple as as an embargo on arms, because you cannot institute an embargo on arms without another level of intervention. And if your purpose is to stop intervention and the expansion of American empire, blah, 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 you get the point. All right, let's talk about something else. Let's talk about AT&T, Time Warner. Actually, I'll talk about AT&T and Time Warner in the bonus show, because I want to make sure I get on the regular show, the political dead. So before I go to the political dead, I'll take this last caller. Caller, you're live on the air. What is your name, comment, and or question? Uh-oh, hang on. Caller 240, you're live.
Hi, this is Barbara. I'm calling from New Jersey. I'm calling about Syria and Yemen. I'll pick either one. Do you care which one?
Hey, go for it. Whichever one you want to hit on.
All right, here's the thing, and I guess my answer to both of them is the same. Stop selling arms across the world, okay? Stop selling arms across the world, because we have problems here in this country, and I'd like to fix those first, and we're not going to be able to make peace at home when we're busy selling arms abroad, okay? Now, why do you want a really big, neat solution when it's a messy, messy problem?
Well, I mean, what you're offering is, in my opinion, is the neat solution that doesn't really address the messy problem. I mean, stopping, again, like I said previously, stopping American arms from going there, which we should do. Like, I don't think we should argue that as a solution to the war. I think we need to argue that because it's simply the right thing to do, because it won't fix the war, but we should do it anyway.
We should do it anyway. Remember the Supreme Court decision just a few weeks ago when they said domestic abusers are not allowed to buy guns legally. domestic abusers can still buy guns through loopholes or inherit them or whatever, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But, so I'm not saying the Syrians, the Yemenis, the Iraqis, the Libyans, and there are many, many groups are not going to be able to buy arms from other people, but we've got to sit back and have some sort of moral standing. And right now, we're just a slimy ball.
To me, you know what? That is the only rational argument for the reason we should stop selling arms. It's because we shouldn't be selling arms. It is not what America should be involved in. It is repugnant. It is disgusting that we have ISIS fighters right now who have their hands on a litany of American weapons, right? It is a scourge on America. Missiles, right? Not just, missiles, weapons, Humvees, everything. Right? They have everything that, and it's all with America's, blessing. Well, not blessing, but it's there, right? It's there because of our businesses, our defense contractors. It's there. So we should stop doing it because it's the right thing to do. We should not be involved in arms trade dealing. However, I still stand by this till the end of the Syrian war. If those arms are not provided by the United States, which it should not be, there is going to be a huge wealth opportunity for some other actor to go in. And unless we, by force, keep arms out, a real embargo uses.
Excuse me, I really want to interrupt here because I've heard you say that before. Is that somehow it follows automatically? We stop selling arms. In my fantasy world, okay, in Barbara's fantasy world, we stop selling arms. But in your fantasy world, we not only stop selling arms, but then we attempt to go in there, Iraq, Syria,
no,
Libya,
I think you heard me wrong.
Somalia, and police it, enforce this embargo. There's no way we can do that.
Exactly. No, Barbara,
I'm not sure
actually
why you think that.
No, because you're not hearing me. You're not hearing me clearly.
Okay,
let me say it again so that you can hear me perfectly clear. I'm saying without that level of embargo on arms, without a blockade on arms, there will be another actor, state actor, or just another defense contractor from another part of the world that will supply the demand for arms in that region. That's why it's not a fix. It's not a fix because we, one, can't do it. Two, we shouldn't go in there and enforce an embargo. Like real, if we're going to stop interventionism, that means just walk away and let it, however it falls. But by us walking away, we're not selling guns, which we shouldn't do. Somebody else is going to. So this is why I disagree with the argument that the solution is to simply stop selling guns, for America to stop selling guns. That's not even a fraction of the solution, because the guns will be replaced by another actor.
Okay, but in that case, if you step back and say, what do I want out of the U.S. arms sales to, let's say, Syria, okay, what do you want? What do you think a coherent foreign policy would look like that included intervention or arms sale or humanitarian aid to Aleppo?
Jesus, number one, it's like it's the moral case against selling arms, right? I am on board with I'm on board with every one of you who say that we should not be selling arms. 100% on board with that. But my reason for being on board is more sober, in my opinion. We just should not be doing it because it is the wrong thing to do, and because it always has blowback. It always has blowback. It's a way of coming back and biting us in the ass. So without, in terms of intervention, I'm not interested in American intervention. Pretty much, I'm trying to think if there are any cases where I'm like actually pro-intervention. The only time I personally, Benjamin Dixon, am in favor of intervention is when there is a genuine humanitarian crisis. Because just like I feel like not selling arms is the moral thing to do, I also feel like standing by while a humanitarian crisis is happening is immoral. And I think we have a responsibility to intervene when we can, not because we want to expand, not because I want to expand America's empire or neocolonialism or any of those things. It's because if I see someone hurting and I have the capacity to alleviate their pain, I have a moral duty. Me personally, Benjamin Dixon has a moral duty to do so. So that's why I advocate for intervention for humanitarian reasons, but fully aware and cognizant of that's been the excuse we've used historically. So it presents a problem that I don't quite have a resolution to. I just know where I stand personally.
But you're also prioritizing the needs of another country over the needs of your fellow citizens.
Well, I honestly
So
think
you're
if we...
okay with sending tax dollars over to another country.
I'm totally okay
Tax
with
dollars
sending...
that
I am absolutely okay
why would you
with... Hang on, let
prioritize?
me finish my thought, and I'll answer your question. I'm totally okay with tax dollars going there because how poorly we spend tax dollars here. If we don't spend that money on defense contractors here and on weapons that we don't even need, on planes that don't even function properly, and on tax breaks on
Littoral combat ships that don't function properly.
right. If we're wasting
DLCS.
trillions of dollars, we can simultaneously take care of America. And I'm not saying that we should go around and be the Santa Claus of the global community, but we can genuinely intervene for real humanitarian crisis, even if it doesn't involve military. Sometimes it just involves food, right? So I am okay with that usage of our tax dollars. I would much rather see that than to see it being spent on useless defense contractors.
So you would say that a humanitarian intervention, for example, now in Aleppo, would be a good idea?
I don't know. I honestly don't know because the way to intervene. Hang on, let me. You asked me a question. Let me finish my answer.
Go ahead. All right.
The way to intervene to actually stop the humanitarian crisis actually does involve a no-fly zone, and that's really a non-starter. So I think President Obama actually. I don't know what they are not stating off the books, but what they're stating on the books in terms of what we're actually doing. I think it's a no-win situation and that there's nothing that we can actually do to fix the problem over there. So stay out of it, right? But you can't say stay out of it without accepting reality that we're going to continue to, and this is all I want progressives to really do. Just accept the reality that by saying we're going to stay out of it, because I don't think that there's anything else that we can do at this point or should do. We are accepting the reality that probably another 250,000 people are going to die before this is over. Just accept that,
well,
and at least
nobody
admit
in the
that.
United States has turned a hair about all the people who've died so far. So what makes you think anybody's going to care about another 250,000 dead people every damn day?
But the question is, do you care?
I'm nobody.
And I'm not asking that to be mean. I'm just sincerely asking, do you care?
Who listens? I care.
That's
why I'm in here, yelling. Okay.
You care. I care. I'm going to be honest with you. And this is really simple for me. I might undermine all of my other arguments. The only reason I care is because of the humanitarian crisis that does exist. I don't really care about the revolution per se because I don't have any personal connection to the revolution. All I have personal connection to is human suffering. And if I see human suffering, I have a desire to want to do something about it. But when we analyze this situation, it is a cluster F, and there's really nothing we can do about it. But I grow really weary with oversimplified solutions and reductionism, saying that all we have to do is stop the arms flow. That's not true. And then all we have, if we do, all these other things. So I just want people to be really sober about what we're saying, what we're asking, and what we're advocating for. And I'm sober in the sense that I know after thinking this thing through, there's really nothing that is the right step for America to do. But by admitting that, we're also admitting that this war is going to just continue brutally killing another 250,000 people over the next 200,000 people over the next presidential term. So that's all.
Why won't you take that next step then? What's holding you back from taking that next step and saying, okay, it's part of a messy solution, it's part of a messy problem, but just let's put pressure on Congress to stop selling arms.
Sure,
Syria,
no,
the Saudis,
just
whoever.
stop.
What's
I've already said that.
Why are you not?
But I've said that.
Well,
And
because you want a neat solution.
no, I think you're still hearing it. Listen, I appreciate the call, and I'm not cutting you off. I'll finish answering your question, but the show time is over. There is no neat solution. I'm actually more okay with a murky solution than a promise of a neat solution. A neat solution is Jill Stein saying, we just need to, I'm sorry. We just need to, I'm sorry. We just need to stop selling arms. That's cute. In terms of solution, that's a nice, neat talking point for a solution that doesn't actually solve the problem. And there's nobody can rationally, if you can rationally argue that simply having America stop selling arms would stop the Syrian civil war, please come and make the argument. But nobody can make that argument. I've not seen one person. You can make the moral argument that America should not be selling arms in the first place. That's the argument that should be made. That's what we should fight for. But we shouldn't fight for that and sell that as a solution for Syria. That's so disingenuous and short-sighted that it's unbecoming of people who are supposed to be the logical thinkers of this political discourse. All right. Boom, boom. Yes. And I'm voting for Jill Stein, right? I just, I expect more people. I expect more people that I support. Like when you got my vote, I expect you to be 100. I expect for you not to do the exact thing you accuse your opponent of doing. I expect for you to not reduce things to being talking points. I expect you to engage your people, help the electorate become smarter. Don't reduce it to talking points and sound bites that oversimplifies a problem and now has a lot of people thinking that all we have to do in Syria is to stop selling guns. No. All we need to do is stop selling guns because that's just the right thing to do. But that is not a solution for Syria. And I don't know how many ways I can say it. All right. Enough of that. Let's talk about the political dead. All right. The political dead. Last night on The Walking Dead, it was the most painful, agonizing show. I have never wanted The Walking Dead to end. I just wanted this hour to be over. It was miserable. Now, before I go any further, spoiler warning. Stop, because I'm telling you who got killed. I'm going into detail. The reason I'm bringing this up, though, let me set the stage. One of the reasons I'm fascinated with The Walking Dead is because it is a great picture. It is a fascinating picture into the look of the world of anarchy. And again, because I have a very diverse crowd, I use anarchy in the definition from international relations, not anarchy in terms of the political movement. Anarchy from the international relations definition means that there's simply no overarching authority to which all actors must be beholden. In other words, there's no global government that can force America or anyone else to stop selling arms, that can force China to recognize, global patent law. International law. There's no overarching force. The UN is not that, right? So when I say anarchy, that's what I mean. And The Walking Dead is a fascinating look in terms of what anarchy would look like. What would the absence of government or the breakdown, the violent breakdown and the sudden breakdown of government in America, in the world look like? It's fascinating in this from another perspective in just studying failed states. Like if we think of nations that the government that's installed no longer has the legitimate force of power, the legitimate use of force within their region, right? And you have the government and you have warlords, you have rebels, you have all of these people who are competing to be the legitimate use of force in that region. The Walking Dead is a fascinating look into that. And so last night we got introduced to a character by the name of Negan. Or actually, we got introduced last year, but we really got an intimate look into Negan. Negan is a character that showed up originally in the 100th issue of the Walking Dead novel, graphic novel. Negan is a brutal tyrant. He is in a lot of ways, and let me just cut to the point. To me, Negan represents the government in a lot of ways. Negan has organized hundreds of people. He's organized hundreds of weapons. I mean, all the weapons they would ever need, all of the equipment that they would ever need, all of the force that they ever need. And they have become they have become the recognized authority in the region. So much so that they have the right to force attacks out of all their citizens. And this is the whole backdrop of this new Negan storyline. Negan is demanding 50% of whatever you make. I want, bitches. That's Negan. And I just can't help but think about that top tax margin, what, 35, 37% now? So we're not too far from the government asking for 50% of what we make. In exchange for that 50%, Negan's going to let you live. He's going to let you work. He's going to let you prosper. He's going to let you be protected. His crew will protect you. I mean, after they've beat you into submission, after they've, killed some of your friends, after they've beat your head into a bloody pulp and forced you into submission, Negan is saying, I've got you. I'm going to protect you, but it's only going to cost you 50% of everything you make. This is a brilliant take on what happens in the absence of a government. You get the replacement. You get a replacement, a proxy, someone who's going to serve in that capacity. And this is exactly what happens in The Walking Dead. This is kind of like an allegory. This is kind of like I think allegory is the word I'm looking for our global problem. The entire conversation about Syria, Aleppo, and about Yemen, about all of these, about violating the sovereignty of another nation, of all these things that we talk about on my show on foreign policy. This is a brilliant comparison because think of the entire world as being that small little pocket that Negan now controls. Before Negan was there, you had individual actors, states, individual groups, small little groups who had their own autonomy. They had their own sovereignty. They had their own rules. And if you wanted to force your rules on them, you had to go in and assert force and take over. And that's exactly what Negan has done. Now, I'm not advocating for any of this shit, just to be sure. I'm just letting you know, this is what we study in international relations, that there is the absence of Negan on the international stage. There's an absence of this force, of this brutish force, because we're talking about force. We're talking about someone being able to compel you to give them 50% of what you make. And this force has been so institutionalized in America that we just pay it at the top of our checks. We just pay it because if we don't, we'll go to jail, right? And so because they don't have the option or the luxury of putting people in jail who don't pay their taxes to Negan, they just bash your head in. So that's the fascinating part about this, about the entire show. One is that we could look on a small level, on a micro level, on a nation by nation, and consider like Syria. Consider Syria, where the government no longer has sovereignty over all of its regions. Or consider like probably Somalia would probably be a better example. Consider nations that have sectarian sex. They have sex. They have warlords that control regions. The reason they have that is because the government, for whatever reason, has lost its legitimate claim on force within its borders. And in the absence of that, the strongest man wins. The man with the biggest guns, the man with the most force, the man who often is the most brutal, the man who has no regard for life, would take human life, who will instill fear. And that's why Thomas Hobbes, I believe, the Leviathan, that's why he described the government as a Leviathan, as a beast that comes out of the ocean and instills fear into the people. This is our entire structure. This is the best that human civilization has come up with so far, is to voluntarily or involuntarily give up. Now, here's the difference. The primary difference is Are we voluntarily doing it? Or are we doing it out of compulsion? Are we being forced to do it? And in quote unquote democracy, we believe that we're voluntarily giving this authority over to our government. Question is, what happens when you voluntarily challenge that control? Well, we've been talking about that all night. Anyway, so much more. I didn't tell you who got killed. Maybe I won't do that out of respect for people who haven't seen it yet. But that's the Political Dead. See you guys next time.
The Benjamin Dixon Show is only possible with listener support. Go to www.thebenjamindixonshow.com to register for our blog, join the Progressive Army, and support The Benjamin Dixon Show. It's Ben Dixon! If you like this episode, be sure to share, like, and subscribe.
Consider becoming a Patreon. Go to www.patreon.com/The BPD Show and support The Benjamin Dixon Show.